My name is Brent Robison, and I have the privilege of being the midwife to bring Mark's book out into the world. As an editor and designer, and mostly I think as a friend. We've become good friends over the last few months working on this project, and I'm very happy about that. I think probably most of you, or many of you, have probably known him longer than I have. We met 10 years ago when I published one of the stories that's in here in a literary journal that I published for Hudson Valley writers called Prima Materia. Thought it was a wonderful story, and I'm really glad that I was really glad over the ensuing years to discover what a body of work he had, and to finally be able to help him bring it out into the world. So, and it's really gratifying to see so many people here to celebrate this event. The title story, Dancing with Dasein, you may wonder what that means. I did. Mark taught me. Dasein, noun, German. Being there, or presence, often translated in English as existence. A fundamental concept in Martin Heidegger's philosophy, referring to the coherence of being in the world. So, dancing with Dasein is something we're all doing every day, and that's what's going on with all the characters in this book. Struggling, waltzing, wrestling, dancing with how to live in the world. I'm just going to read you the introduction, read you a bio of Mark from the last page of the book, and then it'll be his turn to read you some selections. This is about the author. Mark Morganstern is a native of Schenectady, New York. He studied at the Manhattan School of Music, played bass fiddle, and toured with jazz and classical ensembles before deciding that music was not his best choice of profession. An avid reader and writer, he switched majors, studied with Edna O'Brien, Maureen Howard, and Jonathan Wordsworth, and graduated from the City University of New York with an MA in English and Creative Writing. His fiction has appeared in Prima Materia, the Crescent City Review, Piedmont Literary Review, New Southern Literary Messenger, Hunger Magazine, Espresso Tilt, Mothering Magazine, and other journals, and was anthologized in Tribute to Orpheus II. He received an honorable mention for his story Tomorrow's Special, which is in here, published in the Chronogram November '06 fiction contest issue, selected by the guest judge Valerie Martin. Mark subs at the local high school, everything from physics to gym, occasionally even English, and he books concerts here for the Rosendale Cafe, which he owns with his wife Susan and their children. And he hopes to retain that position despite his kids' threats to fire him for writing fiction on the job. Mark?
I thought there'd be a better turnout. But we can work with that. Thank you, Ted. First, a few thank yous, and then some brief excerpts from a few of the stories. And then we get to the cheese and crackers and wine, which is why you have these types of events. So people can eat cheese and crackers and drink wine. Okay, so a few thank yous. First, thank you. I know that a lot of you have come to the cafe over the years. I know you enjoy the ambience of it, the warmth of it, certainly the food. There is a we hope, an established feeling of goodness. And for all that, we're going to have to thank Susan Dorsey Morganstern. Susan at the moment is on baby patrol, and our grandson Jack is asleep in the car, and so we're going to have to get the reading over before he wakes up, because there will be no reading if he gets in here. Susan, thank you. My family's here, my sister Paula, my nephew Heath, my cousin Peter, it's Carol. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. They came down from Albany, my family, and the rest of my family here. I want to thank Brent, my editor, for allowing me to be, at times, more than a free-range chicken in some of these stories. I know that some of them probably went a little too far, but he did manage to bring me back when that happened. And so I thank you so much, Brent. Someone editing a book for you, you don't realize it's sort of like going to your doctor and having a checkup. It gets very personal, and resulting in a long-term friendship. So I thank you so much for what you did on the book. The most compliments I've had on this book is the cover. Really. Some people just want to read the cover and stop there. My good friend, Stotts Fassolt, who's a director of the Woodstock School of Art, after reading a few of the stories, emailed me this watercolor. And when I saw it, it just absolutely captivated me, and I said, that's the cover of the book. Somehow, to me, this picture encapsulates what I was trying to do. Stotts, where are you? Thank you, Stotts. Okay, and I also need to thank three people. These days, you can't have a credible book, not even a self-published book, unless you have blurbs. You have to get blurbs. And you got to get blurbs not from the ice cream delivery guy or the produce guy. You got to get them from established, well-known, in some cases, as this is, famous writers. And I'm glad my friend Laura Shane Cunningham is here today. Laura has a book coming out in the near future, right? What is that coming out? It'll be in Russia first.
No, it's here.
It'll be in Rose. Will it be here? Oh, good.
Well, no, it'll be in America.
It'll be in America. I've invited her to have it here, but I have a feeling she found a more prestigious venue too. Well, thank you very much. Jennifer Bell is not here. She's a lovely lady who always comes and sits on that front seat, right where you are, and she's always writing. She's produced some best-selling novels, and I have to thank Jennifer Bell for her lovely blurb. And my favorite suspense writer, where is my suspense right there? That's Kevin Hurley, who just released a book called Cut and Cover, and is doing quite well, and we're just waiting to hear about the movie rights. It's one of those movies. Kevin is the kind of writer who blows up everything in the first paragraph and then he settles down. So, yeah. He had tried to give me that advice, but that's not how I write. I have more of a mild approach. Okay, those are the thank yous. I'm going to attempt to do this reading. It's a little overwhelming, but we'll see what we can do for you, okay? Okay, so the first one is the end of a story called Electric City Blues. I am from Schenectady, the Electric City, General Electric, certainly one of the great blues towns in America. That was my life when I was there. And in this story, there are two cousins, Walt and Marty, and they just, what they want most of all is to be jazz musicians. Their parents just want to get them bar mitzvahed and into, you know, into law school or something, and that doesn't actually happen. So after a series of events and hanging out with the guys and the famous musicians who had come through town, they finally get to play a gig at a place called the Club El Jor, which is was a black club in the downtown section of Broadway of Schenectady. And this is the ending section of it. All the stories I'm reading, they're a little out of context because you're not hearing the whole story, but this is a very bright gathering of people, so I'm not going to worry about that. The gig came together unexpectedly. Fortunately, most of the good local players were on the road. Roy thought we could handle it. A few blocks east of Quickies, a new club had opened, the Fro, named for the teased-out black hairstyle. They had instituted a Sunday evening concert series featuring the best of the local cats and those who were touring. Roy got the call to bring in a house band. On a cold Sunday in March, sporadic snow flurries zipping in a sharp wind, we made our debut. Roy's nephew, Jerome, was up from Baltimore, a highly accomplished tenor man and a devout Muslim, already with 4 years on the road with Nancy Wilson. Sal Bento was in the guitar seat, Walt Gordon on drums, and Marty Hoffman on bass. I was nervous and sweating through my freshly ironed shirt. I couldn't disappoint Roy or the others. The MC introduced the inimitable Roy Jackson on piano and vocals, then the rest of us. I shuddered when he called my name over the mic. Roy kicked off the first set with Night Train, a crowd pleaser. Immediately, people were up and out of their seats, dancing, hitting the bar, yelling approval at the stage. Appropriately, Roy took the first solo, digging into a battered Steinway upright. The cigarette burns on it looked like hieroglyphs. His combination of stride and barrel house got everybody up and moving. It is not hyperbole to say that the joint was jumping. I could actually feel it through the soles of my shoes. Jerome cradled his tenor sax, rocking back and forth, both meditative and appreciating his uncle. He would not reveal obvious pleasure in the music because his offering was directed to an audience of one, Allah. The applause was deafening after Roy finished. Then Sal took it, looking happier than I'd ever seen him, his beautiful Umbrian face aglow with a torrent of improvisation passing through him. I understood then better days would have awaited him if only he had gotten out of this town. When Jerome took it over, the room seemed to lift. His horn, the ancient horn that called the tribes together, the horn that calls us to life and death, the horn he played sounded like the mouthpiece was in his soul. Walt and I gave each other a quick look of recognition. It was clear that Jerome had a certain date with monsterhood. He played chorus after chorus, each one elevating the dialogue, further igniting the crowd, some of whom were standing on chairs and waving their arms. Others set drinks on the bandstand, but Jerome wouldn't have any of that. Roy reached down and grabbed a beer. When it was my turn, I managed a credible solo without sacrificing any time, after which I opened my eyes and saw Roy's smiling face, an awesome African mask, smoke pouring from his wide nostrils, sparse lower teeth nodding at me. My chest tightened and tears came to my eyes. I have never felt so loved before. Walt's drum solo was great. He played without restriction or self-consciousness. Jerome, who had at first resisted playing with a white rhythm section, momentarily raised the bell of his horn to Walt when he finished. My happiness for Walt was unbounded. I wished I could inhabit this moment forever and do this for the rest of my life. Walt and I showed ourselves to be worthy of the more seasoned men we were playing with. We were a unit, a fury of sound that had taken on its own life, a dominant but graceful steamroller. The camaraderie was potent, the room was hot, the bar windows fogged and splashed with neon. A woman in a purple cocktail dress and a glittering tiara called out, "Hey, bassman, make it talk." I went down into myself and offered a solo to All the Things You Are. The goodness of these people gave me a sense of buoyancy and confidence. I had of these people whom my family would have preferred I did not congregate with, were the ones who made me feel valued, the ones who spoke to me, the ones who allowed me to have a voice. It was magic, but suddenly we're at the end of the last set. We had just finished Night in Tunisia, and my hands were throbbing. Roy liked to begin and end with the blues, so he called out KC Blues by none other than Charles Yardbird Parker. Jerome naturally took the lead on this one, and again the room elevated another notch. It was like Bird himself was playing. I looked down at our audience and smiled. Then, at a small table, I saw my dad and Uncle Jack sitting motionless before untouched glasses of ginger ale. A shard of fear knifed through me and my arms cramped. I redoubled my effort to keep the tune moving. I glanced at Walt to see if he'd noticed them. I guessed he had because his head was hanging down almost to the snare drum. I managed to control myself, to lay down the bass line like I was spreading flower petals before a great procession. I looked at them again, hoping for something. I searched my father's eyes with tears in mine. I wanted him to know that my part in all of this was what I had to give him, if he wanted it. My father and Uncle Jack effectively withstood the gaiety, the propulsion of the music, and the evidence of the audience. They were like petrified trees in a hurricane, unbending. I couldn't look anymore and continue to play. I threw my attention on Jerome, who was now walking across the stage and wailing like he was some supercharged waiting room. It was all there. The hope, the heartbreak, the degradation of the martyred, the centuries of longing. Walt gave me one last smile, engraving his sweaty face in my mind forever. I had this thought: we are the greatest tribe on earth. I looked back at my father. The table was empty, the ginger ale bubbling slowly, exhausting its carbonation on the little white napkins. Outside it was blustery and dark. A chill whipped through our damp, smoky clothes. There was no hint of spring hiding in the dull green buds. A street lamp caught some pale snowflakes in its light. We could see our breath as we closed our cases and carried them across the lot. Both cars were facing the street, parking lights on, engines running. Uncle Jack's trunk was already open. My father sat reading the newspaper in his car. I helped Walt stow the drum cases in the trunk, closing it with a dull thud. "You can really play, man," I said. Carefully, I slid the bass in the passenger seat over the seat, making sure the bridge did not hit the interior light. I sunk in next to my father. Walt was already gone. We drove down the length of Broadway, past the gas station. The horse was turning away from us, reflecting its muscular butt in the windshield. In between Quickies and the Edison School, I could see the GE sign dilating up to full power, a sizable disc, an emblem of despair, a branding iron. Years later, I came through town on a Billie Holiday tribute tour. I had distinguished myself, but had not reached the heights of the musicians I'd worshipped. And soon I'd be following another career, that of booking agent. At least I'd know who to call. After the gig that night, I had a couple hours to kill before the bus to Syracuse. I walked through the old neighborhood. I noticed that Quickies had burned down. The gas station was boarded up, but the horse was still there, no longer revolving, but committed and resolved. A pink crime light illuminated it. A part of its wing had broken off. I heard someone sobbing. It was me. You saw all that, I said to the horse. You saw it, and you never flew away. I'm sort of thinking in the interest of time, maybe I'll just skip to the last excerpt. There are times I've been where you are wishing they would skip to the last excerpt. I'm trying to do something that we can't seem to teach singer-songwriters, and that is when you're talking to people, you look on both sides of the room. Some people it's all there, sort of here, but there are people over there, and there are people at the door. Hi, how you doing?
Hey, your grandson, is he still in the car? Yeah. All right, Jack.
Yeah, we better do this before Jack gets up, because Jack will be looking to party. Okay, so this excerpt comes from a story called Glenna's View. Briefly, Glenna is an assistant curator at a very important art gallery in downtown Manhattan, and she's assigned by the chief curator to keep tabs on and follow this German artist around who comes over for a very, very important, significant display in sculpture. The artist's name is Frosch Hunzlicker, and she has an assistant named Ting Dry, who Glenna learns later is like Thing 3 in German. And she certainly turns out to be Thing 3. And she and Glenna and Frosch have some very, very deep exchanges, just stopping before blood, but people do get arrested, etc. So now we're back, she's back upstate at toward the end of the story. She and her husband have some issues. I don't know how that happens with couples, but she has a little girl named Tori, and the husband, who's still deeply in love with her, has built her a very special window seat. It's oversized, has a very expensive special light on top that turns and dims and does all sorts of things, which you'll hear about. And again, a little bit out of context, but I know who I'm reading to, okay? This won't be fun either.
Tell us again what you're reading, Mark.
What page?
What page?
Page? Oh my God. We're on page 130.
Oh, some people have their books.
Paragraph says exhausted, okay?
Got it.
Okay. Exhausted, she dropped her clothes and threw Roy's shirt across her bare shoulders. She climbed into her window seat and stared at the cascade of fireflies. She'd never seen so many. She'd watched them swarming the last few nights, and now she was remembering her grandmother's story. She was only 2 years older than Tori, running through the backyard, catching the insects on her arms and legs. Grandma told her that June was the month of magic, when the fireflies were out. It was the time to make wishes. The fireflies carried your wishes in their flickering lanterns to a special place where they would be granted by a fairy princess. Glenna dabbed at her eyes, forming the incantation with just her lips. June is the month of magic. The incandescent light of the clumsy insects crushed her with nostalgia, but she wanted to feel them again on her skin. She stood on the cushion, felt the shirt slide off, and pushed open the window, extending a hand on either side of the frame to keep balance. The first one bumped against her cheek, the other at her shoulder. Soon they landed on her breast, stomach, and legs. The bobbing and crawling tickled her flesh. She glanced around to see the room populated, blinking and glowing with a fairyland. Now if I could just fly. Roy stumbled over the garden hose, caught himself, then paused to urinate in the butterfly bush. He planted it when Tori was born. He wiped his forehead with his t-shirt against the stifling humidity. A preview of a steamy July that was about to be upon them. The air was thick with fireflies. One bounced off his eye and maneuvered into his hair. He blew one off his lower lip. As he approached the pool, he heard the frogs sluicing about and croaking plaintively at their predicament. Trapped and trying to escape before exhaustion and chlorine finished them off. The pool's electronics hummed a bass accompaniment under their croaking. A bloated band of them had managed to board Tori's little mermaid floater, bulgy-eyed explorers, peering out in search of a more hospitable land. The frog log had detached from the side of the pool, stranding the victims without an exit. He coaxed it over with the aluminum pole and retracted it. I'm just going to take one. The explorers abandoned their raft, dove in, and went to it. They hopped up the frog log clumsily, then on to the warm flagstone, making for the safety of the ferns. Once there, they made their way through the fence links and headed toward the fresh water creek below the tree line to final safety. Roy wondered what enticed them to the pool in the first place. One landed on his foot and sat there several moments. Dazed, it slipped off and disappeared with the others into the ferns. Go on, you lucky bastard. Get out of here. He felt mildly virtuous about the frog's rescue, but still depressed, made his way up the extensive sloping lawn, reminded of how efficiently humidity coaxed grass up from the soil. He stopped to scan his surroundings. The nasturtiums and geraniums waved pom-poms at him from the sidelines, as if he were a victorious quarterback. But I am not victorious, he thought. In this house, I am just a water boy. It seemed that all the fireflies on the eastern seaboard had converged on his property for some unannounced convocation. Beetles, really, he remembered, but named for the light organs under their abdomens that take in oxygen and combine it with, what was it? He just read the article in National Geographic. He had time to catch up on reading at the library on Thursdays during story hour, Tori's favorite time. She and her little contemporaries got to scope each other out, have a few laughs, learn about sharing, and practice for the eventual adult rules of dominance and submission. With any lack, she'd be raised by two parents who set her on the course to accept what grace and beauty there was to be had in this world. And if they were very lucky, she'd learn to create her own. The air was thick with them now, glossing over trees and grasses like polished stone. Luciferin, that was the word. Oxygen mixes with luciferin and produces light with almost no heat. Light with almost no heat. What passed for a relationship between him and Glenna. He decided to roll another cigarette and witness more of the spectacle. When would this happen again? Soon enough, he'd scrutinize Glenna's sleeping body, a nightly vigil, then he'd lie down on the cot next to Tori's bed. He liked to see her eyes open on the new day. It would be morning soon, and she was a dependable little rooster. When he reached the patio, out of habit, he raised his eyes and saw Glenna, as if she were floating in the open window. A searing jolt switched his lungs into high capacity. She wasn't about to jump, was she? Standing on the seat, she commanded about 3/4 of the window's height. She leaned forward into the frame like a ship's figurehead. Her slender arms stretched outward, her cascading autumn hair fallen over her shoulders, and her full nursing breast thrust forward, challenging the night. A multitude of fireflies illuminated her naked body, casting a resplendent glow upon her flesh. Her torso, stomach, hips, and the indecipherable patch between her legs scintillated. Roy thought she was looking up at the moon, but her eyes were closed. The crystal burst posidi, that's the light, added to the composition of color, mixing in the pulsing hue of the fireflies. The various hues and a dim offering of moon resulted in a subtle display of shadow and light over her body. It was as if dabs of paint, Charmin fine oils, Cézanne's bourbons, had been applied to her by a master's brush, and if she'd been created and suspended in the frame in a ephemeral exhibition. Transfixed, he stared at this strange thing, his wife, Tori's mother, overwhelmed and captivated by her beauty, a paralyzing image. It had happened before, but with less intensity, when he stumbled upon a work in an obscure alcove in a museum. If there is genius in the production, there was always a subtle exchange between the viewer and the object. Appreciation and devastation exact fair coin from the observer. It was several minutes before Clena cast her eyes downward, her head tilted toward her shoulder. Again, Roy's breath froze in his throat, his heart sped like a treadmill. She stood expressionless, somehow conclusive within herself, a martyred, voluptuous saint, but vibrant as anything the universe could offer. They watched each other for long moments, without expression or gesture. Each firefly, Roy recalled from the article, had a blinking signal that helped it find a potential mate with gifts of nectar and pollen. He recalled as well that the blinking was a warning to predators that this morsel would have a sickening taste. Protection. Which was it? Now she's slowly sliding her hands along the frame, kneeling, then backing away, withdrawing from view. Rigid, a sentinel on extreme watch, he waited, his t-shirt soaked, his vision slightly blurred. Presently the light switched off and she returned to the window, this time regarding him below, arms at her side, another sentinel on watch. Time, and then more time, and what seemed like all of time, present and past. Each continued to view the other through a rising veil of fireflies, precious green and white pearls tumbling in the air between them. I looked up when I got reading, I thought, oh my God, they're still here. It's never this quiet. Right? How's Jack doing over there? Is he still sleeping? Jack, okay? I think we're going to get have a little Jack before it's over. Okay, a last excerpt. This is from a story called Three Baskets. I was at a bat mitzvah. Where's John Hughes? I was at your daughter's bat mitzvah, and that was the time of year, that the rabbi will read from the different sections, and it was time to hear about Joseph again. And we heard about the mean Pharaoh and how the chief baker was executed, but the wine bearer was spared. And I was sitting next to my friend Betty. I said, I'm so tired of this stuff. And what if the baker got away? What if he gets away? Stuff happens, right? So, just briefly, on the back of the book, it says, a reincarnating ancient Egyptian chef who travels thousands of years from the banks of the Nile to a surf-crazed town in Southern California to open a bakery. And that's what happened in the story. So I'm on page, for those of you.
Over there.
I'm on page 269, starting
And
with...
photograph that moment, please.
Now, one of his last jobs before he could be released to this Southern California town in the Pacific Ocean, many terrible things happened to him. One of the worst was he was momentarily incarnated into a White House chef's body where he had to make breakfast for Dick Cheney. That's hell, right? That's hell. And he had to do that before he could continue his journey and then wind up on the Gold Coast. So this starts out with the way Dick Cheney responded to the breakfast he made for him. And there's some good food stuff talk in here soon, a little food review. Not this place. Okay? We don't do that here. Okay? So, all right. I also applied an additional touch, a not generally known glaze on the ham that I struggled briefly to recreate with the limited ingredients available. Something from the old kingdom called slave's blood. Thick and delicious, perfect for the occasion. Standing at attention at the sideboard, stiff in my service whites, remembering that I was momentarily a Mexican, I watched him lean over his wheelchair to lick the surface of the ham. He couldn't help himself. Then he spooned the plum preserves into his mouth. He shot me a wry, questioning smirk and a piercing glance, as if to confirm I was the usual Hispanic who prepared his morning meals. It was, I might add, around 2009. This was to be his last breakfast at the White House, and he and the dim, troublesome puppet he worked for would be heading back to Texas. A fleeting moment of condescension sparked through the synapses in my brain. They're all the same, I thought. Just starving, spoiled children, easily led, superstitiously delighted, forever casting a wary eye upon the cooks and the servants who might one day slit their throats. And often that is the case. A conveniently overlooked truth that's played out since the dynasties. Otherwise, there'd be no nervous, temporary spates of democracy, which last, with any luck, in most incarnations, about as long as unrefrigerated salmon. Apparently shocked and overcome by the flavor and satisfaction I placed before him, he spun around again in his chair and applied close surveillance upon my person. Having attained a modicum of clairvoyance due to my horrendous and varied experiences, I knew he was going to try to hire me out and hustle me back to his Texas kitchen, where his gastronomical pleasures would be well served. Instead, he snagged the house Mexican, who conveniently was looking for a ticket home to Texas to rejoin his wife and kids and their extended family across the border, where they would happily return in a year's time after arriving back in Texas. I could see this as if it was a news video in my head, and I understood that my presence was a favor, a good deed to help out another professional. Vaya con Dios, amigo. Cheney went back to his plate, leaving it as if it had been power washed. My work was finished. My purpose remains, illuminate the palate. That is what has preserved me and kept me going through the centuries. I was just a guest chef for that morning, and off in a tumultuous, thorn-ridden, confusing cloud by lunchtime. I regarded the powerful man as I began to fade and go blank. Juan Carlos consciousness overtaking mine again. Whoever I am, glancing at him for the last time, even trapped in limbo, I break no law, I harm no man, woman, or animal. That tumultuous, thorn-ridden cloud I mentioned stormed west, producing much vomiting and dizziness. The entertainment was a looped, edited version of my misadventures, projected with deafening volume. I watched myself being killed over and over again, struggling with circumstances insurmountable and foreign to me. At the designated coordinates, I was dumped back into the ocean in a painful belly flop. My arrival was less than auspicious. Fate had ultimately determined that I should be deposited like flotsam between the oceanside pier at the foot of that trendy beach town. I spent a good hour exhausting myself while dodging pylons and mad surfers. Finally, I was disgorged from the tepid salt water upon the shore at high noon and was ridiculed by a group of diligent camp counselors, all tanned and blonde, as I frightened children in a play park making my way up to the pier's entrance. I waved lamely and tried to smile to show the children there was nothing to fear, but some of them burst into tears. A counselor approached me, shaking a piece of driftwood. I cowered and moved as fast as I could. Once at the pier's entrance, exhausted, gulping mouthfuls of air, I realized that I was only wearing a thin cloth wrap around my private parts, as if I'd escaped from a medieval painting of the crucifixion. That did not discourage an avid saleswoman who approached me and insisted that I tour a luxury condo just across the way, conveniently located near a spectacular eatery known as 333 Pacific. I scanned the upscale facade, cleverly named for the address, from which wafted the bouquet of noon-hour mussels steamed with, I thought, too generous an application of garlic, though served with a fine Chardonnay. I did not have a problem with the parsley, I never do, which mixed well with the salt air and streams of fresh weed smoke produced by skateboarders. I was somewhat confused from the half-drowning ordeal as the woman produced a coupon for a vodka cocktail at the aforementioned restaurant if I took the condo tour. I explained that I was new in town, having just arrived in the community, and would prefer to shop for clothing first before securing housing. She impressed the importance of location of the condo adjacent to the waterfront and pier activity, not to mention the Thursday night street fair that took place just above the railroad tracks. Her insistence taught me that folks in California are too smart to dismiss an unshaven vagrant in a diaper, because anyone can have money. Think about Howard Hughes or Jim Morrison. Two uniformed officers appeared on either side of me with a German shepherd exposing its well-kept fangs 10 inches from the vicinity of my groin, causing me to freeze in place. I did not wish to suffer Osiris's fate, his phallus eaten by a catfish, though later restored by ISIS. And I suspected this could be more grisly and with a less successful outcome. It had been predetermined by fate. I learned quickly that I'd be introduced to, or rather thrust upon, an American culture in the throes of paranoia due to the 9/11 attack a decade earlier. I learned later that there were other homeless people in town who groaned, grunted, farted, and squeaked their shopping cart wheels through the neighborhoods and waterfront area, but they knew the local scene of well-kept yards and spiffy beach houses, and they only came out at night. As I appeared decidedly Middle Eastern, my complexion and body darkened and scarred from torment and endless forced travel, the recipient of evil, planned and random, bearded, clothed in a Swami diaper, I was the perfect candidate for enrollment in the Homeland Security lockup program. This was confirmed when the officer asked me to produce a picture ID. I glanced down at my body instructively, so he noticed I had many pockets, and said, with the thinnest of accents I could muster. I'm so sorry, officer. I seem to have forgotten my wallet. They took me away with the saleswoman still waving the coupon. I could tour the condo after I posted bail. She assured me of that. There was no bail for 3 weeks while I fattened up in the Oceanside jail on refried beans, chicken frijadas, red rice, fresh avocado, much appreciated, and bottled water. It gave me time to review my journey and plan my next career move, which no doubt would be in the food industry. At least I was on the Gold Coast. The psychological profile administered by the county mental health department determined that I was a harmless, homeless, drug-compromised hippie who lost his way back to his group home. Now, why was I in the water? The psychologist hypothesized that I imagined I could swim to London to relive the budding roots of the British invasion. As my profile matched many others who wandered around the affluent beach town, I was released to a helpful ashram which took in vagrants further down the coast. I was subjected to meditation, gluten-free cookies, and preaching, and the liberation gained from menial labor, i.e. cleaning the house for our beloved guru. Accustomed to being a captive, it took me a while to realize I wasn't being held against my will. I strolled out one moonless night while the devotees argued peevishly over the ashram's distribution of chores and policies, and who was most devoted to the non-bathing guru who stored their wallets and jewelry in his private safe. I wandered through the streets and answered the first sign I saw in the shop's window. Baker, wanted, some experience required. I entered the shop happily, the bell tingling behind me like the sound of paradise. In short order, I was promoted to head cook, requesting that I preferred to be addressed as Chief Baker, in charge of all 3 of their outlets, which increased profits at a surprising rate, according to the owner. After my self-emancipation, having once again created means, which I have done repeatedly with the scarcest of resources, I returned one evening out of nostalgia to the Oceanside Pier and snagged a coupon for that same condo woman who didn't recognize me cleaned up and looking prosperous. I promised to take the tour after I'd had a drink to calm my vertigo. I then paid a professional visit to 333 Pacific. Not to conduct a formal review, just a courtesy call. I cannot resist an opinion. Corporate restaurants, which I will never work for, those specializing in steaks and seafood, hyper-creative appetizers, assorted outrageous bites, I hate it when they call them bites, and artisan-crafted cocktails, swirling with fresh fruits and dashes of flavoring and invented concoctions du jour, which might include some of the seasoning combinations I've created, as posted on webtender.com, are to the consumer what Pleasure Island turned out to be for the little wooden puppet Pinocchio. After you drop $250 or $300 and fill yourself with grass-fed beef or Oxford-graduated lobster with shaved chestnuts, you feel like an ass. Why? Because you're unfulfilled. You're not just eating the food. You're attempting to eat the ambiance. You're incorporating the trappings of the room, its elegance, its overwealth, into yourself, somehow increasing your value. In essence, you're making a statement. I can afford this luxury, while others cannot. Therefore, I am what? I'm out of $300. The issue, once again, being one of place and self-worth, which, as I've stated, contributes to the world of mischief. I can make you a bowl of fresh lentil soup with a poppy seed roll with a sweet butter and a glass of very decent claret for $2.95 to $3.75, and you wouldn't feel like an ass afterwards. But enough cuisine speak. enough of my tribulations, and enough of God snoring in his heavenly cave, and Joseph a pile of dust beside him. I've been the guest of his house of horrors and managed to avoid his final mercy and judgment for almost 5,000 years. And I've done pretty well for myself. My card, if I may. The Caliph Imhotep Weingruber. Yes, Weingruber. I took my wife's maiden name as an added layer of protection. The elegant Sheila Ray Weinberger. Why Sheila? Because she is the embodiment of the Holy Grail, the repository of gourmet, exotic, skillet, culinary, and sensual arts. She is the missing piece of my soul. She understands food and life and the living of it more than anyone I've met in the many worlds I've traveled. Yes, my card, 3 Baskets Bakery, Ensenada, California. Baked goods and sweetmeats to satisfy the Pharaoh in you.
Platter.
Or are there books somewhere else?
Oh, yeah, I got those.
Yeah, let's toast!
I was hoping you'd read